Hi, I'm Leah McNally, one of the experts here at Flourish and Artisan Indie, and today I'm talking to you about Etsy SEO and some of the upcoming changes to the Etsy search. So welcome. Before I get started on the changes, and also I'm going to answer some questions that you guys posted a week or so ago. I want to go over how the Etsy search works. So there's pretty much 4 things you need to know about Etsy SEO. The first thing is Etsy is looking for a match. So they're going to look at the words in your titles and tags, and they're going to try and find a match to the words that the customer is typing into the search bar. It's that simple. For your item to show up in a search, there must be a match of some sort, and this comes straight from Etsy. According to Etsy, items that do not contain a match to some sort of the buyer's search won't be included in the results. I know that we've seen occasionally, I've seen at least in my own shop, some really random things show up that people clicked on. So it's possible that there are occasionally little outliers and random glitches, but those little random things aside, this is how it works. Etsy is looking to find a match. So exact matches are always stronger and preferred over matches to individual words, right? So what Etsy's looking for, if the customer types in blackbird earrings, and I just chose that at random, Etsy's going to look first for an item in their database that has those same words in the same order. Blackbird earrings, right? And those things are going to be its first choice. Excuse me. If it can't find what it's looking for, then it starts to piece different words together, right? So just keep that in mind. The third really important thing about Etsy SEO is that the phrases and the words you use at the beginning of your titles are considered more important than the words at the ends of the titles, right? So you always want to put your strongest keywords, and I would consider something like that, like something with a nice search count and moderate competition at the beginnings of your titles and towards the middle, and save low competition and low search terms that might be relevant for the ends of your titles. All right, and number 4, Etsy wants to find the same words and phrases in the titles and the tags, right? So we always suggest that you make your titles and your tags match. Now, parentheses, the order of the tags is not as important as it is for the order of the titles. So you want to get those same words in there and phrases, but if you make a title and create your tags and then you go back a few weeks later and rearrange the order of your title or take a non-performing keyword out and insert one that you think might work better, you don't have to totally redo the tags. You can just delete the ones that had to do with whatever you removed and insert the new ones. All right. Sorry, we went too far. All right. But so here's the deal though, no guessing. It's really important that when you find some phrases, like it's okay to start with guessing as brainstorming, but you always want to take those phrases to one of our research tools, and that could be Etsy Rank, it could be Marmalade. There are a number of other ones out there, SEMrush and Moz. Some of these are paid, some of these are free. you always want to use some sort of research tool and try and match up the phrases that you use in your titles to the ones that shoppers are using when they're searching, because that's going to increase rather the likelihood that they're going to see your item when they're searching for something. So, and of course, beyond these four main things, there is additional information that is used by the search engine that comes from what we call the Etsy algorithm. There we go. The Etsy search algorithm. Dun, dun, dun. Right? So, the thing with the Etsy search algorithm is they tell us a little bit about what's in it, but they don't give us the exact balance of entirely what makes up the algorithm, or how much weight is placed on different factors in the algorithm. But I do want to go over this with you a little bit so you're aware of what things are included in the algorithm. So starting last year, Etsy added the attributes, and that is what they also sometimes call the structured search. It's the search bar down the left side of the page that you see now, and it allows customers to filter by things like free shipping, sale offers, shorter processing times, and also location. And it also includes some other things. Color now, it's where you filter between handmade, vintage, and some other things like that. These things are definitely part of the algorithm. As far as location, Etsy has noticed a tendency for customers, especially in some of the bigger markets, I believe that's the United States, somewhat Canada, possibly Australia, maybe the UK. They've noticed a tendency for customers want that from those countries to want to order from within their own country. So the default is always set to your country, although customers can go down on that left side and change it to everywhere. And it's a little more obvious than it used to be, so I think that's good news. But just, one thing to remember, that is a kind of a preference that they've documented that customers had. It's kind of hard if you're, trying to fight against that. Just one thing to keep in mind. The next thing that's part of the listing algorithm or rather the Etsy algorithm, is what they call listing quality. And this is where it includes your sales history, which we've seen historically is a really big part of the algorithm. It also includes the likelihood that your item's going to get some sort of click on it, and also the number of favorites your item in shops get. And this, we know over the past few years that favorites has been dialed down somewhat, a lot because people were playing a lot of games. So favorites isn't as important as it used to be back in the beginning, but it still does play some small part in your in the listing algorithm and what Etsy decides to choose. The next big part of the algorithm has to do with what Etsy calls quality of experience. So, and that's specifically your reviews. It also has to do with, they also say that they want to see that your policies are filled out fully, and they give just a slight advantage over people that use their policies versus making your own policies, but it's very minor. They also want to see that your about page is filled out. They want to see those two things specifically. Some of the other things that information about your shop is less important, like frequently asked questions. But definitely they want to see your policies are there and your about page is filled out. It also includes, it takes into account things like fairly recent cases, especially if they weren't resolved favorably, and things like cases against intellectual property infringement. So definitely a serious reason to think about your customer service, what you can do to improve your shop and make it better to avoid things like cases and bad reviews. And then really thinking seriously, we talk about this a lot in Etsy, about selling items that are trademarked by other people or that might create intellectual property infringement cases. All right, so those are the big things that go into the Etsy algorithm. As I mentioned before, there are other factors that Etsy's probably not telling us about, and that's pretty much true for any of the big search engines and businesses. They really don't want you. If everybody knew, everybody would try to game the system. So they keep some of those things confidential, but they have kind of given us the big group there. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that are changing. So over the past couple of years, Etsy's been giving us a lot of signals that they are changing things in the search. And I know it can be very scary sounding, especially if you've had a shop that's been established for a few years. You've figured out a routine that you feel like is working, and maybe things have changed. But Etsy has been telling us all along that they are going to make these changes, including a year or so back, maybe a year and a half ago, they bought a company that specialized in search and artificial intelligence called Blackbird Technologies. And they've indicated that is going to be a really important change. They're trying to give the customer more context, or give your items more context. Now, before I dive into that, and I know there's been a lot of rumors and wild speculation on what these changes are and what they're going to mean, I spent some time looking at the video that Josh Silverman, Etsy's SEO, released in December, and also a written Q&A that he did in the Etsy forums on December 13th, 2017. And there was some, if you really read between the lines, there were some interesting things there. And also, if you read what he said, I think there's some things to consider. So one of the things when reading in the Q&A session in the forums, Josh specifically said, the way we match your search terms to listings hasn't changed, and our guidance remains the same, including recommendations for keywords, titles, and categories. So all of those things I just talked about, those 4 things you need to know about Etsy search, those have not changed. They're still the same. Let's see. But one thing that we do know is that Etsy is adding features to enhance the new search capacity, and as I said before, they've been talking about that for the past couple years. And again, here's from that same Q&A. Josh says, we're working hard to get better at understanding what your item actually is based on all of the information in your listings. And that includes image recognition, right? Those are your photos. And a little less focus on your titles. Eventually, our goal is to have you design your title and item description in a way that most appeals to customers. Right? So that's kind of where he's telling us where Etsy is going. They really want to see pictures. That's one of the things that the new Blackbird changes to the search engine is going to affect. That was one of the specialties that company was working on, which was image recognition. And also, that they're kind of moving a little bit away from the way you do your titles and a little more into using the data in the attributes and the item description to choose search results. Now, this is actually a good thing. So right now, Etsy titles work more like what would be called a meta tag in a website. So, and what happens is like those are all your keywords and your phrases, right? But when we put them in an Etsy title, it tends to become this really awkward jumble of words and phrases that appeals to the Etsy search engine, but it doesn't look very good to customers, right? And it's kind of like if each of our Etsy shops was our own standalone websites, that information would still be there, but it would be hidden in the background behind the code, and customers wouldn't see it. And so I feel personally that a lot of times when you're trying to get as many keyword phrases as you can into the title to kind of be able to hit as many searches, it's kind of like you're letting the customers see the mess in the back of your workshop instead of a beautifully curated catalog, or like kind of putting it akin to being like a really lovely display in a boutique, which is, I think, really what we're more trying to get across to our customers, right? So I'm just going to say that one more time. Trying to get as many keyword phrases into the title is a lot more like letting customers see the mess in your workshop rather than that beautifully curated catalog or a display in the boutique, right? So we know that shoppers are really interested in looking at the pictures and getting the information. I mean, okay, we know they don't read, but that's another discussion. But instead of creating this big messy jumble, Etsy's goal is to make it into a more natural description like a title in a catalog, right? So in order to make this work, Etsy's been adding features, right? So where is all this headed? For the future for Etsy SEO, you can definitely bank on the fact that they're putting more emphasis on the attribute data, right? That's that data that customers can filter on in the left-hand search bar. So if you haven't gotten around to filling all that out for your listings, and I know if you've got a lot of listings, that can be painful, might have been painful to go through all that. But definitely go through and make sure you have all your attribute data filled out and that it's filled out correctly. They've added more photos. So additional photo slots are there for two reasons. First of all, they sometimes can better show off your item. I know from my experience, there are definitely items when sometimes just a couple of slides are all you need. If you do SVG files or digital downloads, you really don't need all 10 photos. But other times when you have a product, there are times when 5 photos weren't quite enough, right? So I'm going to emphasize this, if you could use those photos to your advantage to give your customers and the search engine more information about your product and the context and how it's used, right? So that's more details, more views of the back, the front, the upside down, how your product's finished, close-ups. That could also be lifestyle shots, right? If you could use those to your effect, definitely use those 10 photo slots. Etsy's not saying you have to use all of them, but if you can use them, put them to work for you. They've also given us more categories, right? So again, categories are a great way for your customers to find what they're looking for, especially if you've got a lot of items. I mean, if you've just got a couple of pages worth, you probably don't need a zillion categories. But as I shop through Etsy, I see lots of stores that have hundreds of items and relatively few categories for the amount of items that they have. And as a shopper, sometimes that frustrates me. I really don't want to keep clicking through endless number of pages of hundreds and hundreds of items when I'm just looking for something fairly specific. So use those categories. They also help the search engine, right, determine context. And they're also SEO opportunities. So just like you go through and look for things that customers are searching for your item titles and tags, there's also an opportunity to put those same sort of words into your categories. And I would encourage you to do that, right? And they can be broader. They don't have to be, like a lot of times with titles, we're looking for things that are much more narrowly focused, that kind of long tail search range. Categories can be like bigger, broader terms. Christmas shirts, that's a pretty big, broad term. Depending on how many items, it might be, if you do jewelry, it might be earrings or necklaces, although, if you've got a lot of items, you probably want to get farther down than that. Not everything, there is a character limit, so not every category title, there might be something that's really good for you that's not a search term, and that's okay. But if you can make at least some of them kind of blend in with your other keywords and complement your shop SEO, that's a great opportunity. And then the last thing that Josh pretty much said specifically in that quote is that they're going to start looking at information in your description. Now, they have not given us a drop-dead date. I really searched and I couldn't find anything. They have not said, this is it, we're doing it. But now is a good time to start working on your listing descriptions. You really want to start working into, you want to look at how can you write your descriptions in a way that uses those same keyword phrases that you've got in your titles and your tags. You also want to use them in a really natural way. So make your sentences flow. This is not the place where you just stuff a list of your keywords as the top line in your listing. You really, the search engine's not going to like. But if you can find a way to say, hey, this item is a great gift for Mother's Day, right? You want to just work those into your descriptions. So I would go ahead, and that's one thing if you want to go through, if you've got some keywords that are already working for you, if you haven't already, start working on your descriptions and start making those changes now. And I'm also going to point out that pulling data from your titles, your tags, and from your descriptions where it's included in a natural way is very Google-like, right? So they're kind of moving more with this into kind of the whole, the way the Google search might work as well. But wait, there's more. Excuse me. So one of the things that was mentioned in both the video and the Q&A in the forums is that they are not, the search engine, we've talked about this a couple of times, that the search engine is looking for context, right? And Josh says specifically through context-specific ranking, we're personalizing search rankings in real time using information about the shopper, the time of day, and other context-specific factors. And this new approach is leading to an increase of sales in the marketplace. So now let's talk about what context is, right? And part of that you might be going like, wait, what? So the context is really things like why people buy your item, what need your item fills, right? So that might be I need a gift. That might be I need to reorganize my desk and I need some cute little storage containers to decorate my desk, for instance. That's a need. That's a problem. A need that I have might be to be fashionable and trendy, and I want the latest accessories, or I can't find the kind of clothes that I want to wear locally. I mean, those are all needs that people have and problems that need to be solved. And again, I think I mentioned gifts. That's a big one. This is the sort of context that's going to go in your titles, your tags specifically, and your descriptions. And some of that, as far as kind of like in a lifestyle way, is going to come from your photos. But in addition to those things, so that's one of the reasons it's really important you get some of that context into your title and not just your item, not just words that say what your item is, but why people are going to use it. Even more context is going to come from the audience, from social media, and targeted advertising. So we are back around to kind of that thing we talk about in Flourish all the time, which is knowing your target audience, branding your shop to match what that audience expects, understanding what your audience wants. And there's two parts to that. There is the psychographic data, which are common beliefs and ideals that your audience might share, and that kind of is separate from what we also call demographics, which has to do with those things like age, income, location, those really kind of hard things that are data that's easy to get. So those two things are kind of like two layers that come with your target audience, because people that have common beliefs may have slightly different demographic data, right? Sometimes it's very similarly matched, and sometimes it's different. But all that data is important. Oops, let's go back a slide. So this is where I'm going to suggest that Etsy wants to use the data that it collects from customers, just based on things like putting cookies and your search history, on your computer, and like what they learn from what you look at, and what they glean from what you buy. And that's where they bring in things like Josh mentioned, time of day, for instance, that people tend to shop. That's probably something they get a lot of data on, what things get looked at various times a day. But in addition to this, I'm going to suggest that I think that Etsy is hoping that they're going to get a lot more information from things like Google Analytics, tracking cookies, and even Facebook pixels. They just released that new social media, the new social media tool, and they're encouraging you to post directly to Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest and Instagram, I think, directly through Etsy. And by doing that, that helps them learn more information about who your customer is and what people are clicking on. They have also recently set it up for you to do Facebook advertising directly through Etsy, and also add the Facebook pixel to your store. This is a lot of powerful consumer data, and I'm going to suggest that this is really how Etsy is going to put context of what your item is and what your customer is looking for. This is how they're really going to connect that context to your listing, right? So when you think back, this is kind of all contained together. So I would encourage you to start using those tools, like posting on social media. Do at least some of your posting. I know if you've got stuff going on in different channels, you don't want to do 100% of your social media posting through Etsy, and that's fine. But at least post some of your posts from Etsy, right? I would highly suggest that. Go ahead and use those tools, because that's going to help the search engine understand more about what your customers want and help them point people towards your items. So what can you do right now, right? What can you do? I'm going to kind of sum this part of the talk up right here. The first one is, when you are choosing your titles and tags, you really want to research and identify phrases that shoppers are using, and you want to find relevant long tail phrases. That's more important than ever. You kind of want to go deeper than just the broad phrases, silver earrings. That one's really broad. You really want to kind of understand what your customer's looking for, and you need a longer tail phrase. And that might be silver dangle earrings for women, petite silver studs. You really want to look into kind of those longer phrases. Start working on your descriptions in preparation for kind of, as we know, things are going to change. So start writing those phrases into your descriptions in a natural way. Make them grammatically correct, make them sound nice, a description that a person might want to read and feel comfortable reading. And I would highly suggest looking at some of the trainings that our experts have done on copy if you're not sure where to start with that. We've got some great people out there that are willing to help with that, so definitely start working your keyword phrases into your descriptions. Use your categories. Go ahead. If you've got a ton of items, go and review your categories. See if you can figure out better ways to divide your things up that are more logical. And don't forget that those are SEO and context opportunities, right? So use that. Use that to your advantage. Know your target audience. We can't seem to say that enough here in Artisan, Indie, and Flourish. It's going to be more important than ever to really know your target audience, right? So that you know exactly what's going on and what they're looking for, why your product appeals to them. All right, and then use social media and advertising to your advantage, right? So you definitely want to take that. Etsy's given us those tools, and there's a reason for that. They haven't done that just to be like nice and make it more convenient. They've done that because there's a lot of data to be gleaned from that and a lot of context. So use the, rather context, but use those things to your advantage. All righty. Now, whoops. All right. Now I'm going to answer some of the SEO questions that were in the thread that Laura Noel posted about a week, maybe 10 days ago. She had asked me to wait and not hold off on answering those questions, but to do it within the presentation. There's a few I'm not going to touch on. I think a couple of them were really specific to Etsy Rank, and one or two of them were just kind of more broad than I could get to here. They kind of maybe need their own video. But I am going to answer kind of several of the ones that seem to come up a lot in different versions. So here we go. And I just need a little sip here. So one question I get asked a lot, where can I find keywords? Where can I find those long-tail keywords for my shoppers? We talk a lot about using the Etsy search bar as a place to start collecting keywords. It isn't just you found it in the Etsy search bar and that must be it, but it's a starting place. So I'm going to suggest the Etsy search bar. I'm going to suggest the Amazon search bar. Like I was putting in, I think that the search I was doing for these little screenshots was the word bird earrings, which is really broad. But for instance, Amazon especially suggested some really great long tail keywords there. So, or at least a place to start for looking at long tail keywords. So, you know, Amazon gets a lot of product searches. They're a great place to start brainstorming for keywords for your item. Pinterest, which I've also included a screenshot here, is another great place to start. And you can see when you put in a search with Pinterest, then you get that little bar at the top with all those different little colored suggestions. And Etsy started to do the same thing as well. Sometimes they're throwing that at the top or even in the middle of the page. Those are definitely great suggestions to kind of see. They're responding with typical things that shoppers are searching for. Some of these things might be fairly broad or high competition. I'm just going to warn you that you're definitely going to find some stuff that might not be perfect to use, but it's definitely a great place to get started with some ideas of what sorts of things you can use. I'm also going to mention, I want to say Anna Bogoskayevka. I think I'm saying her name right. I'm sorry if I mangled it. She just did a presentation about 6 months ago where she made some additional suggestions on where you could go to find keywords, right? Where you could find keyword suggestions, so go find that training. Also, if in the past you were ever using the Google Keyword Planner, even though it's only currently giving ranges and not exact search counts, it's still a great place to get keyword ideas. And then you want to take all these keyword ideas that you've collected, whether that's on a piece of paper or a spreadsheet, whatever works for you, and you want to research them in some sort of tool that's going to let you see what kind of demand or search counts there might be for those phrases, right? So that's the next step that's super important. If you're using, for instance, if you're using Marmalade is using that. You can see, I want to say, they either use daily or weekly searches, and they also give you that measurement that they call keyword engagement. If you're using Etsy Rank, again, they give you, I forget if it's daily or weekly, they do give you a search count number, and they also give you a range that they call demand, and that's actually based on the search counts from the Bing Keyword Planner, which I actually think is a really great piece of information to have. Just depends on what it's going to be called, really depends on the different tools, but I just wanted to talk about Etsy Rank and Marmalade because those are the two that we seem to talk about a lot. If you're ever kind of looking at one and you're not sure what it is, feel free to tag me and ask me, and I will do my best. But in general, like I said, we're looking for some measurement of the amount of search and customer interest there is in a particular search phrase, right? And then the second thing you want to do is see how much competition there is for that term. And these sorts of things can range really wildly. And even though sometimes it doesn't feel like it, if you keep digging, it is possible with many categories to find search terms that customers use a lot that sellers on Etsy are not using. There are definitely opportunities there. So both Etsy and Marmalade do contain a competition comparison. I personally think it's always good. This is one thing the Etsy search bar is good for, is to go see exactly what your competition is. So if you take that phrase and you put quotes around it and you put it in the Etsy search bar, you get that little number next to it. That number is the number of listings that are using that same phrase. So if you put the quotes around the phrase, you get the exact number of listings using that exact keyword phrase. If you put the phrase in without the quotes, you see just the number of listings that have any combination of keywords that might match that phrase. And again, going back to those 4 important things to know about Etsy SEO, we know that the search engine prefers an exact match. All right, so this comes up a lot, the order of keywords in the title. And I did talk about this kind of the last couple times I did the Valentine keywords and also some Christmas holiday keywords. I went a little more in depth into this, but I'm going to go back and talk about, again, those top 4 things you need to know about Etsy SEO. And number 3 was words at the beginning of the titles are considered more important than words at the ends of the titles. So you really want to start off with your best keyword phrases that have the most potential. And I'm going to say probably moderate competition. My suggestion is start with 1 or maybe 2 moderate competition descriptive phrases at the beginning of your title, right? So you want to tell customers what it is. Put a why type phrase, a context phrase. That might be a gift, something that indicates why customers might use it. You know, that might be gift for mom, you know, something like that. Put those phrases in the middle. And then if you have space at the end, you can fill that in with phrases that are relevant but have low search and low competition, right? That's the place to put some of those phrases. Sometimes that might have something to do with color. Sometimes, there's all sorts of phrases that come up that they feel like they're relevant. Someone might be searching for that combination, but they're just not searched as often. So you can put those things at the end of the phrases. And especially if they're low, really low competition, because the search engine doesn't have as much to choose from when they're looking for a match. So the fact that your phrase, your item is going to pop up for that search is a given. And it's less important that you have the exact match of the phrases the way it is with moderate to higher competition phrases. Alrighty, what was next here? Okay, repeating keywords. So this gets asked a lot, and I am going to use Tammy's example since she posted it. I feel like the advice columnist. Dear Leah, I'm confused about repeating keywords. So in Tammy's example here, she's got an interesting selection of keywords going on, and I think she's concerned, number one, that she's repeating the word earrings quite a bit. So first I'm going to say that the search engine, it's okay to, in titles and tags, it's okay to repeat a word like earrings. You know, that's inevitable in a lot of cases. Like when you've got a product, you can use the word earrings, you can use jewelry, you've got some descriptors like adjectives like dangle or petite, those sorts of things. But as long as you're using phrases that are ideally or exact matches that customers are using to search with, that's fine. The search engine's not going to penalize you for that. Now, when you break your these titles up into tags, and I've got another slide where we're going to talk about that, one thing that I highlighted here down in the bottom, if you've got tiny pearl earrings in a tag, there's no need to use a separate tag that says pearl earrings by itself. And the same thing in your title, because you've already got that once, right? So if you've got the word combination pearl earrings somewhere else, you don't need to use it as a separate title or tag. So, and in Tammy's description of her title, she's got tiny pearl earrings, cluster earrings, tiny jewelry, petite earrings, simple dangle earrings, little purple feminine freshwater pearl earrings. I'm going to say that, again, there's not really any, you're not being penalized, but what's missing from those particular titles and tags is the context that I've been talking about. So I would double check all of those phrases in something like Marmalade or Etsy Rank. I would put at the very front a couple of those phrases that have good search counts and moderate competition. And then I would follow that up with a context phrase. And that might be something having to do with bridal jewelry. It might have to do something with the words gift. I might try and find something like the words for women or for girls, whatever is appropriate here. But in my opinion, this tag needs some context, right? So just by repeating some of these things, petite earrings, tiny jewelry, some of those things you've just got, it's a little too much what and not enough why people would buy. So I would encourage you again to go through those titles, and I'm sure they're not all equal in competition and in search counts. Pick out the ones that have the best search counts and moderate competition, put a couple of those at the front. Put a Y kind of context keyword with good competition and search counts, moderate in the middle. And then if there's a couple of these, if there's still space in your title and there's a couple of these that are a little less searched on, then put those in the end, or you can make them up in the tags. Okay, thank you, Tammy. Thank you for letting me use your example. All right, so another question I get a lot is, what if you've got a good phrase, but it's too long to fit in those 20 characters that Etsy gives you for a tag, right? So my first suggestion is, if it's too long to fit, really the next best choice that you have is to break it up into 2 shorter tags that are phrases that shoppers are using. And even if they're broader, higher competition tags, that's fine. So a longer phrase like simple dangle earrings could be broken up into 2 tags, simple earrings and dangle earrings. And again, repeating the word earrings in your tag is fine. Sometimes, just because of the number of characters, there's certain words, or the way the phrases are, sometimes that doesn't work, and you just have to break them up into little, 1, 2, 3 word chunks, depending on the phrase. If that's the best you can do, then that's what you need to do. But I would always see if you can break it up kind of like the simple dangle earrings example first. But either way, the order of the words in the tags is a lot less important than it is in the titles. The search engine just wants to find the same words there. So it doesn't have to, as long as those same words are there somewhere, it doesn't have to be an exact match to the tags. All right, title punctuation or delimiters. We had a lot of questions about that. Maybe 3 or 4 people asked variations on this particular question. So I'm going to go back to what Josh said, which is they want you to design your title and item description in a way that most appeals to customers, right? That's what they're moving towards. They're not quite there yet, so you can test kind of sentence-y kind of tags, or titles rather, but at the moment, that's where they're headed. So I just want to say that regardless of what all of those different articles are suggesting, the search engine ignores the punctuation, right? Search engine doesn't care about most of that punctuation at all. And that's why you kind of read some of those articles about how you could remove all your delimiters and make your titles one long string of words. But going back to what I was talking about a little earlier, that's kind of like showing customers like your messy workshop counter rather than your really elegant catalog or lovely boutique, right? And the reason that here in Flourish and Artisan Indie that we suggest using some punctuation in your titles is to make the title easier for your customers to read, right? That's the reason to use punctuation. So if you put a word with an apostrophe S, an apostrophe in it like that, the customer is going to read the apostrophe, and the people that are really bothered by bad grammar are going to appreciate that you put the apostrophe there. The search engine's not going to care either way. So I'm going to go hand in hand with the Flourish recommendation, which is use punctuation to make your title more readable to customers. We highly recommend using the dash. It kind of grammatically, in a readability way, makes your title a little more readable and customer friendly. If you really need those extra spaces for something, you could use a comma. Those are the 2 that I recommend. Like I said, my first choice is the dash. A second choice would be the comma. But the bottom line is the search engine ignores all of it. So just kind of use it to your advantage to make your title and item description appeal to customers. I'm with Josh on that one too. All right. And then someone asked about using phrases like ready to ship or free shipping in the titles. I have actually personally tested this a little bit in years past, and my conclusion is that something like free shipping, super broad, I have not seen a tendency in my various searches for people to be searching for things like bird earrings free shipping. It might be there. You can go back and see if there's some combination like that that works for your items. Like I said, I haven't seen it. I also think that ready to ship is kind of is like Etsy lingo. Like us as Etsy shoppers, as Etsy sellers, like we really understand the difference between ready to ship and something that we're going to produce and takes 2 or 3 weeks, right? And I kind of think that, I don't think that customers, when they shop, are really thinking that way. They somewhat expect everything to be ready to ship, right? And I know with Etsy, we do a lot of make-to-order things, and if you read some of the stuff in the forum that Josh answered, he talks about ways that Etsy is trying to improve this for customers, for shoppers, for them to understand that everything's not ready to ship. They've also added these things to the attributes. So if a customer really wants free shipping, they can filter on the left-hand side for free shipping. Etsy's going to pull that out of your shipping settings. And they've also added an attribute for a filter that's like ready to ship in 1 day, ready to ship in 1 to 3 days. So my tendency is, because these things are broad, let's let the attributes do the work for this. I don't think that we need to use title, kind of precious title space for that, unless you find that there is some indicator that you've got a phrase that's highly used by customers to search with low competition, maybe. But again, I think that let's let the attributes do that work for us. So I wouldn't put those things into my title. And that was it. Oh my God, we've come to the end. So these were some of the links I used for references here. You can go take a look at these things yourself. I'll try and post these also a little later on in the thread. If you have questions, please tag me. I will be happy to check in on and off over the next few days and answer questions for you guys. And I'm always around the groups or in Artisan Indie. Just let me know. Again, I'm Leah McNally, and this was a presentation on Etsy SEO. Ooh, and that was my coffee pot. I guess we're done. Bye.